If YouTube advice feels louder and less useful lately, it's because most creators are playing by old rules. Creators are asking the wrong questions. They're wondering how to compete harder. They should be asking, what's actually changed? YouTubers Colin and Samir recently pointed out something major. We've gone through the information era, survived the attention era, and now we're landing in the perspective era. Yeah, perspective. And if you're over 40, this shift actually favors you. Here's the thing. Creators are stuck in era 2, and the perspective era is era 3. First came the information era. Utility, like fixing a tap. Think of channels like motion array tutorials, tutorial tech, or how-to in 5 minutes. Just utility, how-tos. But information became a commodity. It used to be valuable knowing just how to do something. Now, that value evaporated as a competitive advantage. Why gamble on a 10-minute video when just looking up some text in 30 seconds can give you the same result? So video moved into the attention era, spectacle and retention hacks. This was the birth of the influencer. Personality became the product. Think of Casey Neistat. You didn't watch to learn a specific filmmaking tip. You watched to hang out with him. And that feeling became the hook. And it happened everywhere. You don't watch MKBHD for specs. You watch because you trust his judgment. You don't watch Ali Abdaal for hacks. You watch because you like his story, you like his philosophy, and you just like the way he is lifing. The next era isn't about being more interesting. It's about being more real. And that's where perspective comes in. Perspective is a new currency. Now, perspective isn't the same as opinions. Everyone's got opinions. I like this, I hate that. But perspective, that's you making sense of what's actually happening and sharing that in your video. Colin and Samir explain it like this. Slow down, ask deeper questions. Instead of, here's what happened, try, does this matter? How does this change me? What's the bigger idea here? That is perspective. Let me show you what I think this looks like in practice. I had a situation at a job that I had that shook my confidence. And I want to walk you through how I'd approach this and walk you through the difference between just sharing my opinion and sharing my perspective. Here's what happened. I got restructured out of a job that I loved, that I'd only been at for 6 months. The company pivoted and boom, my job was gone. And mine was the only role that went. Everyone else got new titles and responsibilities. I felt embarrassed and incompetent and like my aging brain couldn't keep up. I worried that maybe I was obsolete and that I couldn't cut it in the private sector because I'd spent so many years working for the government. So if I had a vlogging style of channel or a personal channel, I could have been tempted to make a video sort of ranting about it, like just letting it all out and sharing about how unfair I thought it all was and how brutal it would be looking for a job after I'd only been at a job for 6 months. And there are lots of videos like that. And that's what I'm calling an opinion video. If I decided to make a video about it, coming from a perspective viewpoint, it could have looked more like this. First, context. I would have had to zoom out. I mean, I'd applied for this job and I accepted it. The company took me on believing that I'd be good at the role. Yeah, I found it a hard job. It was a job where I had to learn 6 other people's roles, and my manager was ticking off every single individual task on all of those people's job descriptions after I had learned each task so that I could seamlessly step in and do any part of their job when they were away. On top of my job of looking after her and culling emails and just stepping in for her when she couldn't be there. So learning that bit too. Anyway, 6 months later, that obviously changed their mind. They did a restructure and I was restructured out. Number 2, pattern recognition. I have seen this movie before. This is what companies do. It is businessing. The easy pattern is to fall into victim mode. but I chose to see it from their perspective. And I remember even when the owner of the company told me that I would be invited to a meeting for a bit of a restructure proposal, I was all for it. I don't know about you, but I'm always trying to talk myself into being up for change. I'm like, sure, but I recognised why they needed to let that role go. So I decided to take ownership of the fact that, yeah, I'd accepted the role. I said that I could do it. It was emphasised to me like this is like learning all the roles that report to the manager. And yep. Next thing I'm in the role and next thing I'm out of the role. So I wasn't successful in that role at that company in that time of my life. And when companies need and want to restructure and to switch things up, they do it. And as bad as it can feel, you know what? They are just kind of allowed because they're running the show. Third is meaning. I chose to believe that I'm not a generally incompetent person. I had chosen to pivot and move into a more office-based role after I'd worked in an operations environment for most of my working life, and I fell short in this role. Like it really matters. Just a quick segue here. Jobs are just jobs, run by people who are just human beings, and sometimes things just don't work out, do they? Remember those deeper questions that Colin and Samir asked? Here's the payoff. Why does this matter? Because it shows the difference between opinion, me venting about unfairness, and perspective, which is understanding the full picture. How does this change me? Not immediately, but it shifted the way that I see myself as a creator in that I believe I can show vulnerability without playing the victim. And the bigger idea, life experience teaches you how to hold complexity. And that is exactly what AI can't do. You can't chat GPT life experience. AI can teach you how to pick up your desk with dignity, but it can't actually tell you what it's going to feel like while you're doing that. And inside, it feels like you're breaking a little bit. And I know the fear. If I show my real self, won't that limit my audience? Well, yeah, it will. Your audience will be limited to people who subscribe to you and want to watch your videos rather than those who don't. Like, it's actually a feature, not a bug. You aren't trying to impress everyone. You just want to connect with people like your tribe, like your people who get you. You're trying to connect with people who need your perspective. Because you're not just a YouTuber, you're a real human who's living a real life. You can say, I've been here before, and that builds trust in a way that probably nothing else can. You've already walked the path, and for you, in your circumstances, you know what's on the other side. That is your edge. And here's where most creators get this next bit wrong. They either overshare and lose credibility, or they stay so guarded that no one connects. Now we're going to talk about how to actually do perspective. So what does balance look like? How do you show your perspective without just ranting? It comes down to this, and the trick is thinking like a commentator, not just a reporter. A reporter gives facts, dry facts, but a commentator gives context. Here's the formula. I call it story plus layer. First, just film the story. Tell us what happened. Second, layer in the perspective. This is a step that a lot of people skip. You have to answer those three questions, okay? Tell the story first, but then why does it matter? How does this change me? And what is the bigger idea? Why does it matter? How does it change me? What is the bigger idea? That's the difference. The balance is sharing the personal detail, the vulnerability, and all of that is to service the broader lesson. You don't just dump the emotion, you process it for the viewer. And here's a couple of examples. Here is a couple of creators who I think nail this. First person is Alexa Saranoia. So she has spent probably the last year and a half giving lots of YouTube growth advice and tips for YouTube growth and tutorials like how to. And recently she started her podcast behind the scenes from like the desk of the creator. And in that, she is just being vulnerable and just telling it like it is, like the real raw stuff. She isn't on that podcast just giving information, but she's sharing those questions. Why does this matter? How does this experience that I am having or have had, how does this change me? And what is the bigger idea here? So Alexis Aranoia, if you haven't seen any of her podcast episodes, I highly recommend them because I think she does this beautifully, actually. And another killer example is from Phil, What's Up Boomer. So he made a video called My Unplanned Home Depot Retirement Job. And that wasn't a tutorial video. It was a vulnerable story about how he has been working. He's retired from his professional job that he's had for a long time in his career. And he has gone back to work and he's been working for Home Depot. And that video has racked up 467,000 views so far. Nearly 500,000 people that are connecting with his vulnerability, his rawness, and his honesty about how he feels and what the experience is like for him. He shared, why does this matter? How does this change me? And what is the bigger idea here? And we're all relating to it. I'm sure you've seen it. He made the video in his car, so it wasn't even lights or a fancy studio setup. Yeah, beautiful examples from both of those guys there, Alexa and Phil. In conclusion, information is cheap and attention is just fleeting. But perspective is the new, I want to say, gold bar of YouTube. You, if you're over 40, you've got the one thing that AI can't fake, and that is history. So going forward, as we know, the creators that are winning now, they're not the fastest editors. They're the ones willing to be honest about what they've lived. So here's your move this week, should you decide to accept this challenge. Pick one story from your life that taught you something. Not a tutorial, not a trend, a real moment where you learned what something actually means. Film it. And that is how you turn your age, our age, from a number into your competitive advantage. Drop a comment if this resonates. I want to know what landed for you. And if you enjoyed this video, there is a chance that you will enjoy this one right here. See you on the next one.